Alright guys, are you feeling stuck on the meta treadmill, constantly doing the same dominant strategies over and over and over, and seeing those same decks over and over and not sure what to do? Imagine having a deck so unconventional, so perfectly designed that it systematically dismantles every popular archetype you face. We're diving deeply into the anti-meta mindset and the crafting and the innovative strategies to exploit the current trends and throw your opponents completely off balance. We're going to learn how to build from disruption and finally gain that competitive edge. So, today on Beyond the Meta, let's go! We'll be doing the anti-meta mindset and how you construct your decks with that in mind. So, with that, let's continue. We're dissecting the anti-meta and constructing decks specifically to dismantle prevailing strategies rather than to conform, and it involves identifying the current top-tier archetypes and how to counter those innovative builds, and aiming to exploit the inherent weaknesses of those decks that are in the current competitive landscape with unexpected plays and unconventional card choices. Also learning what card choices they make. So, with that, we're going to discuss three main points in this video, because there's the first of a 5-part series, and this one is unmasking the meta. So the first part here is about identification. So firstly, we start with definitions. What is the meta? What is our top deck? Meta refers to the best way to win, meaning the decks that win most of the times would be meta decks. The more common it is and more often it wins, the more meta the deck is. The top decks will be now always tied to that, because the top decks would also be those meta decks. So currently the top decks would be Guardy, Gold and Go, Dragapult Charizard, Raging Bolt, and we have the end deck coming up. I would say the Charizard Dragapult and the variations of both, I'll put them in the same category because they roughly function the same. With that said, first thing we're doing is we're going to identify what are the things that all these decks have in common, so we can incorporate something into our deck building. So again, all these decks seem vastly different, right? Charizard seems to go up fast and just swing hard. Dragapult does the same. We have our Lunatoon Sorok engine, which is found in a lot of decks, as well as the Golden Go engine, which you find here, which draw a lot of cards and use them to find energy to discard. We also have Ceruledge sometimes, which seeks to draw a bunch of cards and discard energy. And with that, you're starting to hear a trend going on. We also have our Kangaskhan and Mega Absol. So Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Absol. And again, draw 2 cards and swings very hard. Of course, they have the Bunky and the support side deck, but that does something for secondary. So already, and of course we have Gardevoir. I don't have a Gardevoir deck here. I don't like Gardy, so I don't really play it. But we all know what's in Gardevoir. Gardevoir, and we have some Psychic Energy basically. Some Monkey Dory, and yeah, that's pretty much the rundown of the deck. We have different builds, but roughly the same. You try to draw into your pieces to get to Gardy as fast as possible. As said there, these decks all seek to have a little draw power and or card selection. That being said, the most common card you would find right now is Lillie's Determination, because this allows you on a first turn to get 8 cards early game, and on top of your first open 7 is a good option for you to have a really good setup, or even beyond the setup, have a lot of options going into their second turns. So all of those decks, including Raging Bolt, who I didn't mention, sorry about that, even have this card in it. It is almost as prevalent as Budew these days, so you need to keep that in mind. So first thing you build in your deck, you need to have this in mind. What are you going to do about your opponent when they have too much card selection and they have too much card draw? One option is Iono, but Iono isn't very good early game, because if they use the Lillie or Iono early game, yes, they'll lose the cards, but it goes to the bottom. And with lazy determination, they shuffle, so undo this, and they draw 8 cards again. They don't lose anything, the cards are just back in the deck. That's why my premier option that I use in most of my decks, that you would see when I go around, is, because it's three-tiered, Xerosic Machinations. Yes, if your opponent only has 4 cards, it's not as useful, but this is specifically for getting rid of a lot of cards in hand and enough disruption to slow them down. Because an early game Xerosic is a good option to slow them down, even if it's just a bit, or to dismantle a lot of pieces. Because a good open with a Badiou and then a Xerosic Machinations gets rid of a lot of items and a lot of recovery. So just with this, in some meta decks, or deck you're currently using, is enough to just get that little edge over all that draw power. You'll turn the draw power against them. So what else we can identify now starting off? That's one. Secondly, the prevalent support cards and what you could do about them. So another decent option that has become very meta now is Xerosic. Xerosic comes second because every deck would run their A-spec. This is one I would like you to consider purely because the A-spec is exceedingly powerful and game-changing. Every game. Having them not have access to their A-spec is a very, very, very strong benefit. Yes, you give up a spot and a tool, but to keep them off a prime catcher or the toolbox, secret box, sorry, or legacy energy, or all of those things, very good. And of course, if they already use the A-spec, you don't have to use this. It is good discard fodder. We are all using something that needs to discard. Earth and Seal Vessel is also very common, Ultra Balls, so it's still no loss. Even most decks also are running, let's see what we call that stadium again, Artazon. So we can use those Artazons against them and search for it, so it's not a very hard search target as well. Getting into the specifics now, those are some general things you can take advantage of with the decks. The second way to get around disruption would also be, yes, you're an Iono, but you also need to keep in mind that Airy isn't the best option for removal in hands and stuff like that. If you don't know what Airy does, Airy is a supporter that looks at your opponent's hand for an item or two and makes them discard it. Here we go, Airy. And a lot of people fall into this trap and think this is like excellent card because you get 2 items. Not really. You're actually going to burn resources to maybe get 2 items, and you don't want to do maybes. The thing about anti-meta is you need to be consistent, just like them, but you are consistent with your disruption. This isn't consistent. The Xerosic is slightly more consistent than this, as it doesn't only select items, and it's useful as long as they have more than 3 cards in their hand. This depends on them having items. There are decks that are not item heavy, but we know for sure they are heavy on draws. So that's one thing to note when you're thinking about disruption and that kind of stuff in hand. Another one would be Monkey Dory. If you are able to run Monkey Dory, my argument is you should. Being able to put off an extra 30 damage per turn, even if it isn't to kill their Pokemon, is enough to keep yours alive a lot of the time. And in a format where Badiou is the most common Pokemon seen, you might hear my kitten there, being able to take a free prize of Badiou or for Monkey Dory is very, very good and is an excellent strategy. Because it also makes them do the math to keep it off. So those are some general ideas that won't affect your deck too much. That's something that you need to run. Another option is, and my option 3, well, is Judge. Judge because it randomly gives them back 4 cards. Going from 8 or 10 to 4 is very bad, and random is your worst enemy when you're trying to put combo cards together. So let's see, I think I have a Judge in my combo deck. No Judge here, okay. As you can see, lots of Xerosic index. But we also have Judges somewhere, if I can find it. I'll put it up on screen if anything. Let's save some time. The final option is Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp, being an A-spec, is my last option in terms of disruption, because you are using your A-spec slot simply for disruption. And that is good sometimes, but isn't always the best option, because I say that your A-spec is to cover one of your bases in your deck that no other card can cover. So if you can't fit any disruption otherwise, but you have an A-spec slot because the A-spec doesn't change much, and a good and well-placed Unfair Stamp can win you the game, because an early Unfair Stamp, a Badiou into item lock, into an Unfair Stamp after you knock out the Badiou, chez magnifique. Almost perfect. There are very few 3 cards that they can have to come back from something that's brutal. The second thing that you need to identify is you need to also play those decks and learn what are their combos and synergy pieces. Synergy is what cards work together. So the best possible draws and options given what you see on the field. This one is a bit more complicated, because you'll need to actually study decks a bit, even if you're not using them, to know how they function, so you can also play around them. Meaning you don't actually change a card in your deck, but you change your approach and your strategy. Meaning you're playing against Gold and Go, and you've seen a Gold and Go, but you're also seeing a Fez on the bench. You have 2 things set up. Are you going to kill the Gold and Go and then go after the Fez, or do you kill the Fez first and then go after the Gold and Go? And in what situations do you use your target selection properly? Because it's very important and very crucial. Because if they have another Gold and Go on the bench, killing the Gold and Go wouldn't be as effective as getting rid of their 1 Fez. And inversely, if they have only a Gold and Go, but they have Fez and nothing else on the bench or nothing else to evolve up, killing the Gold and Go is a better option, because they still have to take a turn to find and evolve a gimme goal and then enter a Gold and Go. And options like those and knowing them is very crucial as well in terms of target selection. So another thing about the anti-meta strategy is you need to also know what are most common. For example, this Psyduck. It's in a lot of builds to counter the Dusk Online and lesser known Fortress, and also the Magneton that accelerates energy. Just 3 cards. But the cards like counters, one of them is one of the most prevalent strategies in Dragapult. So this is unmatched. And it's very, very good to run. And even if it is that you don't come up in a match against Dragapult, then you don't have to play it, and you should not play it. Because arguably, a lot of people fall into the trap of realizing they're not playing against a deck that a card counters, and they still put it on the bench, and you kind of just mock up a spot and waste the space. Because arguably, you need to identify when a card is no longer useful. Because when you're going anti-meta, you need to be as efficient with your cards as possible. So you don't want a 2-for-1. One of those situations is the difference between Airy and Xerosic. Xerosic will get any cards down to 3. But something like Airy only gets 2 items. Again, that's if they have items and only get you 2. In a situation where you have 12 or 15 cards in their hand, Airy not going to help you. But a well-played Xerosic definitely going to help. Because even if they keep the best 3 cards in their hand, they have two boss, 2 counter catcher, and any number of pieces, energy, stadiums, and all the outs in the world. 1 Xerosic and they need to pick only 3. Which is vastly more useful because, again, not everybody has enough retrieval for supporters, items, and Pokemon, as well as energy. But that's just me. The final part would be the predicting what they are going to do and the expected responses the decks have. I'm trying to keep the video short, so that's why I'm not trying to make this video too overbearing. But you also need to not just lose to the deck, not just play deck. You know how your deck functions. You need to know and see how your opponent's deck functions. If they are playing Charizard, how much energy have you seen them use? Did you see more than 5 energy? Is that crucial? Is that not crucial? Or have you only seen them use 3 energy and then recycle it? Or 5 energy and then after they use 5, they start recycling it? You need to realize, wait, this is a Charizard build that isn't heavy set on energy. This build I have here isn't. As you can see, 4 energy, 5 energy only. And that means after I pull the first 3, when I use it again, if you see me start returning energy, then you know my deck doesn't have much fire energy in it. However, there are a lot of decks where you see, look in the grid, and if you see more than 5 fire energy, you realize, oh, this deck is heavy on fire energy. Because now, you can play around that knowing how important the fire energy is in terms of discarding energy of them or dealing with the Pokemon that have energy on them currently to prioritize. Because if you know they don't have much fire energy left, either knocking out the Pokemon fire energy, the Charizard, or bringing something up with a higher retreat cost. For example there, let's say one here, even 1 or 2. Like Ursaluna up with a 3 retreat cost, meaning they don't have enough energy to do the retreating. So it's little things like that, because decks may have variations, but it's up to you now to be mindset to look for any opening you could find and the ability to exploit it. And the final meta card that I would mention would also be Team Rocket's Watchtower, and these are just evergreen cards, meaning things you could do in every deck. If you don't want to change, you may have a spot, or if you're not already running these, how to use them effectively. The Team Rocket's Watchtower is another underrated one. Firstly, it's a good one in terms of stadium defense. You get rid of one of your opponent's stadium, as long as you aren't running any normal type Pokemon, or crucially running any. And it also turns off things like Noctowls for Terra Box. It turns off the opponent's Ursalunas for those surprise 240 hits and above. It turns off Pidgeots. It turns off so many normal Pokemon in the meta that it is very, very good, and just in general. And even if you're playing a deck that doesn't have many normal Pokemon in it, like I said, those top decks I mentioned don't have normal Pokemon in them generally, or have maybe 1 in it, but running it allows you to get rid of things like Battle Cage, which will stop you from moving energy. It allows you to get rid of the Jamming Tower, try to remember the exact names of Area Zero, even the Psychic Field card allows you to draw for every Psychic Pokemon on your bench. All of those things. Or even the Poison Field card in some more niche objectives and stuff like that. So it's not about just making your whole deck meta, it is using those couples free spaces after you have your deck set to actually be able to accomplish your strategy. Being an anti-meta deck isn't simply making the entire deck just around stopping everybody. Because if your whole deck is made to just counter, how do you win? the anti-meta strategy is mostly about, in Pokemon at least, and in my opinion, which works exceedingly well, that gets me to Arceus every season, and with me in most of my games in person, is often knowing your opponent's strategy and how to disrupt them, taking advantage of weaknesses in your opponent's decks, regardless of what they're playing, and also having the options and the capability to take advantage of weaknesses that pop up just in the game and just in the meta. Because one thing that you'll need to know, mostly if it has all taken away from this single thing, is you need to be as efficient with your cards as possible. So even if you don't have to add or don't want to add meta cards to your deck, efficiency while disrupting your opponent is at the essence, the mindset for disruption. And what do I mean by that? Because I'm only going to give this another 2 minutes. The reason I keep mentioning Xerosic is because in mind you are at least getting rid of cards and you're given just with a couple options. Meaning they're going to use one or two of those options next turn. When they draw, they have 4 cards. They're most likely going to, if they don't have draw on the board, they don't have card selection on the board, or they have it in hand, they need to use one or a few of those cards in order to progress their board the next turn. So if they don't have draw power, let's say they have an energy and a supporter, they use both, that's 2 more resources down, and even if they draw another Lillie's Determination, that's their supporter for the turn, you still disrupt them and you stop their strategy. That means they can't boss, that means they couldn't use any number of other supporters because they had to recover their hand during that turn. The problem with the Ionos being the main part now is that early game you basically reset them a bit. They get too much resources off of it. Yes, late game Iono is excellent as a catch-up mechanic or keep your opponent back because of how, like, reversal of fortune. It's excellent. That's why I still run a couple copies of this and a couple copies of this. I go 2-2 usually because early game to draw, very good, or late game to just equalize or keep them back, very good. Same here, so 1 for early, 1 for late, 1 for early, 1 for late. Because an early beta disruption is very good to stop setup, but also a late game Xerosic, when their deck is low and their hand is big in a lot of decks, all but guarantees a win, because at the point where most cards are out of the deck and you make them discard down to 3, most of their recovery options would be gone and most of their options would have just left them. So it's really, really conditional. And again, stadium defense and anything else. And of course, we're not going to leave out actually focusing on your deck. That's the mindset. Efficiency and getting as much value out of your cards as possible, as everybody wants, but also while disturbing your opponent as much as possible and getting in the way of their strategy. This part's about supporters and it's evergreen. In the next video, we'll talk about the art of counter building and exploiting weaknesses. This will be a more in-depth video on how exactly we are going to adjust the deck. Not just add cards, not just adjust our strategy, adjust our entire deck and play style around our opponent and how we go about disrupting their strategy and making them not lose, but unable to win. Because again, you could try to make them lose, and that's basically just winning or any strategy, but making it difficult or making them unable to win is the essence of the game. Because if they are unable to win, while you are gaining condition and being able to win, you both get the option of coming back from a very losing strategy or losing game, and also getting ahead, making sure they can't catch up, and in both situations you increase your likeliness of winning. If you got this far in the video, like, comment, subscribe, leave your favorite Pokemon in the comments, and I'll leave a few Easter eggs here. Leave just your favorite Pokemon in the comments and your favorite color, and you may get a surprise during the next video. because I want to start giving out gifts to loyal subscribers and those that get through my videos. Thank you very much. Don't forget, and see you in the next one.
Ayan, thanks for tuning in.